I think, whether you want to be a better leader, whether you want to be a better parent, the nice thing about enthusiasm is it applies to everything, right? Like it's pretty rare that you see, like if you're in a group of people and somebody's enthusiastic, that it doesn't, like you said, it's contagious. It rubs off on you a little bit and makes you more excited, which makes if you're the enthusiastic person, you're making other people more enthusiastic, and then they want to be around you more.
Exactly.
Now, there's always going to be some people who are completely non-enthusiastic who are going to tell you to go away, and that's okay, right? But when you're trying to be a leader, it's important to make sure you're inspiring.
I think the word failure is something that people just cringe at when they hear it, when they're told that. And if you want to be a true achiever, you need to embrace failure. And you need to embrace failure in the sense that it should be a learning experience, which we've all heard that before. But, so many people are like, oh, yeah, I know it's supposed to be learning. I understand that. They understand it intellectually, but emotionally, they still have a lot of challenge with it.
Yeah.
And they usually go in the opposite direction. I think a vast majority of people just avoid failure at any cost. And usually that avoidance is procrastination and not doing anything at all. They're just deciding
the most important part of communicating with people. I think it's one of the most. Everybody says you have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Right. For a reason.
So, right, for a reason. So yeah. I think, and you see this. I think phones are a big thing. I think I like the jokes about husbands who watch TV while their wives are talking is a thing.
Right.
I think one of the.
I've never done that.
No, of course not. I think one of the most important parts of communication is eye contact.
Yes.
Eye contact, it's funny, as I get older, I don't know if it's a change in kind of generational, but
those young kids.
I find those young kids on my lawn. I feel like people don't make as much eye contact as they used to during conversation.
Right.
They tend to fidget. They tend to look at their phone. They tend to do things because it's a little bit uncomfortable.
As I was just doing.
As you were just doing, right? So I think we should just start sitting next to each other instead of across from each other, right? But I think that's such an interesting part of communication is that eye contact, because I think it makes people feel like you're actually listening. Like if I'm looking at you, then I'm listening to you. If I'm looking at my phone while you're talking, I might be listening-ish.
Right.
But I'm also probably...
Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Fight.
And why are we so excited today? Because
oh, my goodness.
We are recording episode 500.
Yeah. 500. That's outstanding.
And it's been fun, and I'm excited because I'm going to give a quick synopsis of what we're talking about today. So today, for people listening, this is a really exciting podcast for us because we're talking about 3 things. So, talk about distilling 500 episodes into 3 things that both we think are the most important things, that we've kind of boiled the podcast down to, and also things that we know that you are interested in, the listeners, based on questions you've asked, podcasts you've listened to, and things like that. So I think this is a really cool culmination of 500 episodes, interviews, and things like that.
And not only are we drawing from that, but also our personal experience. You've been in business a long time. You've dealt with a lot of people from the customer's client's end, but also managing and leading a group of people. And there's a lot to be learned in that time frame. And most of I've been teaching for almost 40 years. And I've seen a lot. And dealing with all different ages, from 3 all the way up to people in their 70s and even a couple in their 80s, and training with them and talking to the parents. There's a lot that I've gleaned from it. So talk about a case study. This has been a long case study for me. So I think this is going to be, looking back, this is what we thought this was, and this is how it really is. So we're going to do a little reflection. Yeah. I don't think there's anything that was like we were totally missed the mark on, but I think there were some things that we, like people do, they grow and they adjust, and they're like, well, I think it's more than just that. I think there's a lot of things that we all take for granted that are surface, Like, for instance, the first one, the enthusiasm we're going to talk about. On the surface, people could think it's one thing, but really, there's a lot more to it than just what's the obvious.
Yeah, and I think as we get into this, because I think this is important for people to listen to, this is the episode. Like, if you're listening to this right now, this is the episode to bookmark, right? This
Yep.
is the episode to share because this is really where we're taking three things, that will have I'm going to go out on a limb, like the greatest impact on your life if you put these
Right.
actions into effect. And they're simple, but they're not easy, and they take practice.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
so let's roll into it with my absolute favorite, number one, enthusiasm.
Yes. Of course, that has to be number one with you, right?
Has to be number one, enthusiasm, being excited.
And I think with enthusiasm, people can certainly fake it, and I think there's something to be said about it's okay to fake it a little bit. We You're not always going to want to go to work or want to go to school or want to work out. There's going to be certainly days that you just don't feel into it. The problem arises when people allow that to be part of it, and then they develop habits of laziness. I mean, most all of us we want to find an easier way to do things. I mean, that's what humans do. They look for things, shortcuts and ways to get more done in less time. And on the surface, there's nothing wrong with that. And enthusiasm is kind of part of that. But it really needs to be something that you have to work towards, so that it becomes more of a natural thing. So the fake it till you make it is certainly a good strategy to start with, but then it has to go beyond.
Yeah.
And I think if people think, oh, you're just enthusiasm is about just being positive and just being rah rah. Well, that can lead to you not knowing things that you need to fix.
Yeah.
You not realizing that there's an issue over here that you're ignoring because you're just being positive and enthusiastic, and you don't have that balance of realism.
100%. And I think one of the big misconceptions, that people have with enthusiasm is, I know, like they say this, well, Mark, that's just how you are.
Right.
You're just
Right.
excited. You're
Right.
just
Right. Right.
positive. Why does
Yep.
Mark love Mondays? Because that's just how you are, Mark. You're weird.
Yeah.
And what I try to explain to people is, for me, it's a process,
Right.
because
Right. Right. Yep.
like you said, I don't always want to go to the office. There's things today I don't want to do.
Yeah.
But the first thing, I have to pretend that I'm really excited to do it.
Yep.
And then by acting excited to do it, which we know, like, physiologically this happens,
Hmm.
as I position my body in a way that's excited, my brain gets more excited. The people around me, right, get more excited and they're more
Right.
positive, which in turn makes me more positive. And I think it's just that old adage, which amazing how long it takes me to boil this down, but it's the old adage of enthusiasm's contagious and so is a lack of it.
Yep.
And I agree 100%. Listen, my business has challenges, my relationships have challenges just like everybody.
Yep.
But I really think the difference that enthusiasm makes is moving from a 7-day pity party
Hmm.
to hearing that challenge and saying, awesome, this is great, like,
Right.
what are we doing? 'Cause I agree with you. A lot of people take enthusiasm, I think that was a great point, as just be excited and ignore the problems,
Yep.
which you can't do. But you don't have to be miserable about the problem.
Right.
You
Yep.
can address it with that. Let's go. Let's do this. This is a challenge, and we're going to get it.
Hmm. And I look at enthusiasm is certainly an outward action, of course, like
Mhm.
you mentioned, and you have to have that, and you have to energy, and you have to show energy in your voice and your body language, but also it's a mindset.
Yeah.
And I look at it as a optimistic mindset, because if you're truly enthusiastic and you run into an issue, a problem, which we all do throughout the day, and especially if you're running a business, like you mentioned, if you are miserable about it and if you're negative about it, that also is going to spread.
Mhm.
So the quote you said is enthusiasm is contagious, and so is the lack of it. So it can go in either direction. So if you run into an issue and you're like, you know what, I know this is bad, but we're going to overcome it. We're going to figure it out. And as a leader, that's your language that you're saying. Even in your head, you're saying, "Oh my God, I'm freaking out. I'm not sure what to do." You don't do that if you're leading to other people. You have to give them confidence. You have to be enthusiastic because oftentimes, from my experience, is maybe you don't fix the problem or come up with a problem, but someone on your team does. But if you led with enthusiasm, that allows them the confidence to help with the challenge that you're running into versus you being negative. Oh, the world's ending and this is bad, that's bad. I think all of you are probably not going to have a job next week because we lost this big client. What is that going to do?
Yeah. And
Right? And
well,
that is something that I hear too often with business owners. They just throw in the towel way too early.
Well, and we just finished our leadership blueprint, which I think leads right into this because, I started telling this to my kids and I tell it to my team all the time. Like if you walk into a room and all the people in there smell bad, because this is the world we live in right now, where the thing I continually hear is how people are lazy, people don't want to work, people
Right,
are
right,
whatever.
right,
And I always say, look, if you walk into a room and it smells and all the people smell bad, go into a different room. But if you go into a
right.
different room and those people smell bad too, like check the bottom of your shoes. It might be you. You know what
Right.
I mean? So I mean,
Yep.
I think there's just so much to be gained, from tackling enthusiasm head on and being an enthusiastic leader. That doesn't mean you're, high-fiving people into the floor when they're having a bad day.
Right.
But it means you're that source of inspiration, kind of that light, that helps push people forward.
Yeah, and you want to be you want to have that balance of being realistic and being able to hear other people's problems.
Yes.
I've had different leaders and instructors throughout my time, and so the ones that were enthusiastic but didn't want any bad news, they weren't super effective. They were great to be around, but when there's true problems and I want to talk to you about this, if you're a leader and you constantly spin it in the positive instead of saying, "Oh, Mark, okay, tell me about it." Yeah, that's not so good. And you get all the information out, and then you're in, let's try this. And that's a Anthony Robbins technique of you pace the person. If you're at a level 10, they're a level 2. You don't come at them as a 10. You come at them as a 3, and then you pace them up to a different enthusiasm level. It's like working with kids. If you come in, "Hey, how are you? It's great to see you," and the kid is shy, they're gonna go right behind their mother's leg and never come out to work with you on the floor. You have to be down to their level and literally, if they're small, to their level. But I'm talking about energy wise, and then slowly bring them up. That makes a big difference. And I don't think there's enough awareness with leaders of this is how I act, this is how I sound. I'm too overbearing, I'm too energetic. You can be enthusiastic and be quiet. You can have a quiet enthusiasm, and that's kind of the more appropriate thing.
I love that math because I'm thinking like if there's a 3 and I'm a 10, that means I have to be a 17 to add my 7 to their 3 to get us both to a 10. And that's not, like that's not the way to do it. But when you think about, I like using the numbers because you say, okay, like if someone's at a 3, just be a 4. Don't be
Right.
maybe even come in as a 2, pretend to be a 2 and then fake your way up.
Sure.
But
Right.
I really think that's that this is a huge key to work on. And I think, if people really can just, start addressing things as they come along as let's go, let's do this. It's going to be good. Um, I think people get a lot out of this one.
Yeah, and before we move off of this one, you touched on this a little bit. And I think it's worth
Yeah.
talking about is the negativity and the pity party, and this is
Mhm.
bad, and the negative. I'm going to give you my real thing. If you're negative and everything's bad, you have for the lack of a better term, um, you're not confident in yourself. You lack the enthusiasm because you don't believe you can do it, and you're also taking the easy way out. If we have a problem and I say, it's probably not going to work, well, that's easy. I'm not putting myself on the line because I could be right, and if I'm wrong, it's not a big deal. Well, I'm surprised it worked this time. Don't be that type of person. It takes courage to say, hey, Mark, I know there's a problem, but we're going to get through it. This is how we're going to do it. That takes courage as a leader. That's the kind of leader you want to be in your family. You want to be in business. You want to be that type of leader. And in order to do that, you have to you have to be enthusiastic for that to happen. But it's the confidence and the belief that's going to turn you into that.
Which is literally the perfect segue into this.
Thanks.
I really like you could not have, and I don't even think you meant to do it, but you couldn't have segued
Oh, I
into
did.
it.
Of
Of
course. It
course you
was
did.
all
Of
planned.
course you did. Number two, we're talking about adaptability.
Yep.
And I think there's so much thought process around adaptability and that ability to,
Hmm.
yeah, change things is that kind of go with the flow mentality,
Right.
right? Which
Right.
there's a time and a place for just be, right?
Yep.
And like I enjoy that is just
Hmm.
be. But when we're trying to achieve something, we have to understand that not every wall can be crashed through,
Right.
right? You're not always going to be able to, putting your shoulder through a piece of sheetrock is pretty easy, but breaking down a brick wall, right,
A
can be a
little harder. Yeah.
so having that ability to figure out how to get around the obstacle, how to work with it, I think this is a really important thing to practice.
Well, I think when people think adaptability, they think that you're passive. They
Yeah.
think that loose whatever happens. And certainly there are people like that.
Mhm.
They'll just be passive and, oh, whatever you want. What do you feel like what do you want to do for dinner? Oh, I don't care. And then sometimes it can turn negative and be the passive aggressive person, which those people irritate me even more than just a passive person. Um, but that's not what that means. Adaptability is, I think it's more of what are your hierarchy of importance?
Mhm.
Okay. If your child, and I'm going to talk about parenting because being a parent, but also the 40 years of seeing great parents in the dojo and horrible parents in the dojo and everything in between, I have a pretty good idea of what works and what doesn't raising kids. So if your child says, you know what, I just I don't want to do whatever it is, you have to rank it. Okay, is this going to be something that is simple? It's not a big deal, or is it something that's super important? You know,
Mhm.
and you want to rank it by looking through. Okay, what would happen if they don't go to class? Okay, if they miss one day of class, can they make it up? Certainly. Okay, so it's not the end of the world. However, if that one class turns into missing two classes, then they missed a week, then they missed 2 weeks, what are the chances of coming back? Very nil. Well, what's the effect of them right now? Nothing. They're fine. What
Right.
about in 3 months? Well, their attitude's probably going to be worse. Plus, you allowed them to quit something that's good for them. And then what's going to happen in 6 months or a year? And you know what? I've seen kids, they got all the way close to their black belt and they quit. Well, what is that telling them? What is that? That is showing them that, hey, when things get really hard and it looks like it's impossible for you to do, you should just give up. And that isn't just karate. That is going to be if they have tough time in school or at work or a marriage or anything like that, that compounds and builds on each other. I'm not talking about the orange belt that quit because they didn't like karate. That's a real thing. Karate
Yeah.
isn't for everybody. I'm talking the ones that got so close and they've been in here for years and years and years, and because it got too tough for them, they ended it. And that's one of the things. How do you teach that adaptability? How do you teach that?
Yeah.
And so that I'd like your view on that, if you would.
Yeah. And I think this is so much about there's two things you have to know when it comes to adaptability. At least on my side of things, is you need to know the way, right? You need to know how to do a thing. And then you have to
Hmm.
know yourself, because, listen, if I want to get in shape, I can listen to 400 different people who have different ways,
Right.
right? But I need to understand what my life looks like, right?
Yeah.
I have a friend who's in incredible shape and he doesn't exercise at all, but he plays pickup basketball like 4 days a week, right?
Right.
Which is exercise, right? Don't
Yeah, for sure.
basketball people. I did not say it isn't exercise. I'm just saying he doesn't like go to the gym,
Yeah.
but except for the basketball gym. But that's his way. Now, if I learned that's how people get in shape, I would never get in shape because I don't like basketball and I stink at
Right.
it, right?
Right.
So having that rigid flexibility and that ability to say, okay, I train salespeople. I've got 20 salespeople on my team. If you think three of them can do it the same way I do it, no way, right?
Yeah.
So part of that adaptability is I have to be able to learn the person and find a way for them to be able to achieve the same results, right?
Yep.
Not everyone's going to, dial for dollars 4 hours a day. Some people want
Right.
to be, some people want to be a community salesperson. Some people want to cold call.
Right.
But really, it's about understanding that here's where I want to go, and understanding how can I get there. And I think having that resolve to be flexible in your plan, but inflexible in your destination, I think is so important.
Right. Right. And I think also when things go wrong is thinking about, okay, what is this teaching me? What lesson is I'm learning? And
Yeah.
oftentimes there is a lesson in everything, and it's certainly the negative part. If you get a complaint, um, maybe the person just likes to complain, but also maybe they have a valid point. Maybe there was something that needs to improve, your communication or your system. It could be a bunch of different things. So don't just discount that person of just being grumpy and always complaining. Really think through, is there something valid with that? Now, that doesn't mean that you say, hey, you're right, because you don't always want to validate those types of people, but internally you can learn a lot. And just being adaptive of, is this is this the most important thing? Is this going to be something that is going to take my project off, or am I flexible enough that somebody can do it a different way, or this doesn't need to be done? So that's where your principles come in, your hierarchy of what's important and what's not, and being clear in your own head so you can be adaptable versus being emotional. That's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid emotional decisions, even though most of us all do it and we justify with logic. But we want to try to have that hierarchy of, here are my principles that I'm going to stick with. Here are the things that really are okay to be flexible with, just like you mentioned, the rigid flexibility. So it's having strong principles and flexible tactics, basically.
And I want to hop in here real quick and talk about something I got wrong. Very
Okay.
wrong. Very wrong. Okay. And you'll remember part of this because this is dealing with the old Franklin planners.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You remember when
Of
like
course.
like in the olden days, like you had to order it and it would come in the mail in a big box and you
Yep,
were super excited
absolutely.
to open it.
Exciting day
Such an
when that
exciting day
came.
getting our I know I'm such a nerd. But the back of the planner was where you did all your life planning. There was that section that came, and you would open it. And the first two parts of that I always remember were your mission statement and your
Hmm.
vision, right?
Yep.
And those were the two keys. And I always skipped it. And I went right to the third part, which was goals. Because I
Hmm.
was like, well, goals are important. Like I got to have
Yeah,
goals.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But this
yep,
stuff's
yep.
kind of fluff,
Right.
right? And as I have gotten older and more mature, what I have learned about mission statements, and you don't have to spend a lot of time on this,
Hmm.
right? As a person, but in business, if you're a business owner, if you're the leader of a family or whatever, the deck, especially when you're succeeding, this happens all too often. The deck gets reshuffled. The earthquake
Hmm.
comes. The
Hmm.
punch in the face happens, right?
Hmm.
I don't care how well you know yourself and you know your end game. You have to be able to figure it out when the world is ending,
Right.
because I, I've worked with some of the most successful business owners and some that have gone out of business. And
Hmm.
I feel like that's such a differentiator because things are going to go sideways. The
Right.
business is going to do well. One of your kids is going to run into a challenge. Something is going to, the bottom always drops. And I
Right.
say that to everybody because I want them to know that when it's happening to you, you're not alone, right? Like
Hmm.
we all go through it. And the ability to pace through and become confident in your ability to be adaptable
Right.
is such an important skill to learn.
Yeah. Agreed. Totally agreed. So this brings us to our third, and this one we save for last because it's very important. It's something that a lot of people aren't very good at, and I certainly am still working on it in many ways. Um, and going back, all of these, of course, there's going to be some people that seem natural in one or all of these areas, um, but all of them can be learned. All of these are skills, and this one in particular is a very important skill because you're going to deal with it every day, and that's communications. And I would lump in relationships with that because who are you communicating with? Another person. So there has to be some type of relationship. This one is so important because it really, in my opinion, is going to largely give you either having a great life and a happy life or a miserable life. Think of anybody that you know is going through divorce. How are they doing right now?
Mm.
Probably not good, right? And now sometimes you pick the wrong person. So I would say your picker is off. um, but many times it's lack of communication by one or both people is the reason for divorce. Okay. So um, this is a good subject and something I
Yeah.
think we're going to be able to expand on quite a bit. So
Well, and it's interesting because I think in most cases, like really, there are exceptions, right? But I think in most cases, you can communicate your way through a lot of challenges.
yeah,
Like I think that's a key. I think there are definitely, whether it's employees, whether it's spouses, whatever it is, there's wrong pickers, right?
yeah,
But I think communication is such a valuable skill because it can really help you through a lot of those bumps, and a lot of those bumps are just caused because we think we communicated, but we really didn't. Like I said what I want, you said what you want, but there's
right,
no interaction there, right?
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think when I first think about being a good communicator, I say, okay, well, it's about saying the right things,
yeah,
or knowing how to say the right things.
right.
And in reality, like what I've learned over the years, it's so much more about listening.
You're right. Yep. Yeah, it really is. And we talked about this before, but it's active listening. It's not
Yeah.
passive listening. It's not listening to ready to respond, which there are those people that just have something in their head they're going to say, and whatever you say, they're going to say what they said, even if it doesn't align.
Hmm.
That's not what communication is about. It's about hearing the other person, listening, trying to understand, maybe even asking questions on what they said, depending on what the conversation is. If we're just having coffee, we're just talking about our life, obviously you want to listen and you want to ask questions, is different than you're in a big discussion with your spouse and it's very important stuff. Or you're in a business meeting that is going to determine the fate of your business. Those are a little higher stakes. So it certainly depends on the stake, but also is developing the habits of communication that make a difference. So you're looking at the person, you're listening to the person, your phone, you're not distracted, especially nowadays, by your phone. Dinner time is dinner time, not a time for everybody to be on their phone and texting each other across the table, but actually using words and using their gestures. That's way better.
When my kids do that, I know they're talking about me.
Well, yeah, of course.
Like when we're having dinner and like one will send a text and the other one dings, and I'm like, hey, 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 hey,
Hey, hey, hey, hey! I know what that's
I see
about.
what's happening here. But it is, and it's I always think about like when I'm talking to a group, there's different kinds of communication, right? There's when I start giving my speech, someone says, "Hey, you stink," right? Like that's super verbal, and I can take
Right.
that cue, and I
Hmm.
can be adaptable, right? I love how
Yeah.
these work off each other. I can be adaptable and
Yeah.
change what I'm doing. But another thing you have to look for is, like as I'm talking to a group, are people looking at their phones and texting,
Yep.
right? Because that's a physical cue
Hmm.
of how people are feeling. And I think we miss that a lot when we're talking to people, in our relationships. And if we're not looking at the person we're talking to and
Hmm.
they're saying, "Oh, things are great," you may be missing those physical cues that are saying like maybe they're not. Those opportunities for us to ask questions, to dig
Right.
deeper. And people who want to know the right thing to say, I don't think you can say the right thing until you really know what they said.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting watching people communicate and how communication for most people is just waiting to talk.
Yeah.
right? And realistically, it should be listening, active listening, and making sure you truly understand before you even know what you're going to say.
Yeah, and I think that's where the questions come in. So
Yeah,
getting really good at asking questions. I like to ask empowering questions, trying to get a little bit more out of them. Why do you feel that way? What did you think about this? And even asking questions about how you can improve. I think that shows confidence, and that shows that you are willing to improve and learn. And just because somebody gave their opinion on what you need to improve, that also doesn't mean that they're right. Like if I said, Mark, what do you think of this and this and this? I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to probably take what you say in a higher esteem than just somebody off the street, of course. But that doesn't mean you're 100% right. That's just your perspective.
yeah,
And so when you're listening to people, is trying to, like you said, understand from their perspective, but realize their perspective is different from yours. So maybe neither of you are right. Maybe one of you is right. Maybe one of you half right. I mean, there's all this a spectrum of, and it really doesn't matter who's right. I mean, you shouldn't really, especially with your close relationships, you shouldn't be keeping score,
right.
because that isn't good if you're the one that keeps score. I was right here, you're wrong there. And that's your type of personality. That's very abrasive. And you're probably not going to have a lot of true friends because you're a lot of work.
Yeah,
Who wants a friend that is just a lot of work?
right.
Who wants a spouse that's a lot of work?
Uh-huh.
I mean, honestly, no, I mean, you can lie to yourself, but you really don't. You
Right.
want somebody like you and I have a great relationship. We can talk about a bunch of different stuff. I don't know, since we've reconnected back 11, 12 years ago, I don't know if we've ever had a disagreement. Like, I mean, we will discuss things,
Yeah.
but it's not like we had a fight, just because we understand each other, and we know that if you say something's a little odd and a little off-putting to me, I'll sometimes I'm like, well, that's just him. He didn't mean anything nasty by it, right? Because of the relationship we have, and I think that's an important thing. I mean, think of how long we've known each other,
Yeah.
and think of all the other people you have long-term relationship with. You should be worried to be around people that their longest relationship is 2 years and they're 50 years old.
Right.
It's probably not all the people around them, it's probably them.
Right. There you go
Right?
again. I like it. That's just Mark. That's just how Mark is.
Yeah,
Mark is
yeah.
like that, which I am. I'll get and if my wife, God bless her, didn't have the mentality of, oh, that's just Mark, like
Right.
we would have a mess. But understanding that it does work both ways, right? And I think that's where a lot of relationships break down is we nitpick what other people do without at least having the grace to say, well, I'm sure I have my own thing.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I
Yeah.
think that's like it's almost that's the comedy in relationships, right? Is
Yeah.
if we're not an effective leader, we're not an achiever, what we do is we look at other people and just nitpick how bad they are at certain
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
without being able to give them the grace and say, well, I'm probably also not perfect,
Yeah.
right? Like I live in a place where I understand there are a lot of, and it's funny, you and I talked about it last night,
Yeah.
how I have
Oh
some
yeah.
imperfections in my styles of leading people, right?
Yeah.
But they work in certain situations that I find myself in frequently. And
Right.
I said, you have amazing leadership skills that I don't have that work great in probably more situations than I'm in, but I think understanding other people, really that desire to um, understand, before you have to be understood
Yeah.
is a skill that more people need to develop.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what bridges this, but really all three of them, is gratitude. So
Yeah.
we struggle with this because we were going to include gratitude as one of the three, but we thought, you know what, it really is overarching with all of them, and because it's a mindset, as we talked a lot, is if you're grateful for people in your life, you're grateful for even the problems coming at you, you're grateful for um, being able to be enthusiastic and be able to
Yeah.
communicate and be able to talk and be able to be around people. If you have that gratitude and it's truly coming from the inside, all three of these are going to be better. If you are with somebody and you're grateful for them being in your life, even if you don't say it, they'll probably feel it, and your actions and your words will come out in a much better way.
I really like that. I mean, because I think if you want to be enthusiastic, right? If you truly want to be enthusiastic, wake up every day and look at the 20 to 50 to 100 things you have,
Yeah,
that if I told you I was going to take them away, you wouldn't let me, right?
right,
Like think about those things.
right,
That makes you enthusiastic. If you're grateful for your problems because and those road bumps because they're making you stronger, like you're going to be more adaptable.
right,
And 100% what you said, like communicating. God, what is there a better thing to be grateful for than the people around us?
right.
And send somebody a thank you note, right?
Yep,
Give somebody some honest gratitude. Say, man, and don't just say, hey, the one of my least favorite phrases is when people say, I'm grateful for you.
right.
Like it's almost become like
Yeah,
like just a good like cheers, like I'm grateful for you.
right.
And be specific, right?
Yep,
Like, thanks for taking that, 5 minutes to talk to me last night. Like that meant a
right.
lot.
Yeah.
Um, I love these. These are such great tools for people.
Yeah, so let's review. So the first one we talked about is enthusiasm. I should have had you do this because you're Mr. Enthusiasm. But
Woo!
so yeah, woo. So enthusiasm is about your mindset. It's about being positive, having energy, people that want to be around you because you're enthusiastic, that you bring them up versus bring them down. All of that is going to have a major impact on everything else that you do if you bring the enthusiasm with you.
Absolutely. Our second one being adaptability, right? We want to make sure that we're adaptable, that we know the road bumps are going to come, but we're willing to maintain our resolve and our direction toward our vision and our mission, but we're adaptable in how we get there.
And then the third part was communication. So it's active listening, it's trying to understand people, making sure that you're able to get your point across, but at the same time be flexible. So it's leading back to the second pillar, the adaptability. So all of them definitely intertwine because I think if you're enthusiastic as you're listening and you're adaptable, that's a killer combination right there.
Absolutely. And I think that really distills so much of the podcast, that combined with gratitude, which we talk about on every episode, I feel like.
Right.
These things will absolutely change your life. We hope you enjoyed our 500th episode of the Achieve Results Now podcast. Bookmark it, listen to it again, share it with people, and we'll see you on 501.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.